Hey, everybody. Today on the Nerd Marketing Podcast, we talked to John Hutchison, who is the CEO of Bonobos, just completed his tenure as CEO of Bonobos. He shares with us how he grew that brand, how he thinks of brand marketing versus performance marketing, what he would do if he were running a smaller D2C brand today. He also ran TRX, which is that performance equipment company. And so really interesting conversation with John. We had a great time, and we're really lucky to have him at this stage in his career. So I hope you enjoy today and enjoy the podcast with John Hutchison. First, I want to ask you about the print.
Yeah,
Because I tried to coordinate, but I'm realizing it's not quite. I don't have the green.
it's very
So
close.
what's the story behind the print?
Yeah, so I'm calling in here from my home office. And when I started with Bonobos, we're a hybrid business, and I'd be working some days from home. And I thought, like, I want to always be about the brand. And so Bonobos is kind of famous for our prints. Thank you for wearing a Bonobos shirt. I recognize that one. And so, yeah, I took this is our Froggy Floral shirt print, and I had it turned into custom wallpaper to put on the back of my wall here in my office. And so everyone gets a kick out of it. And I actually have the shirt, so I'll wear the shirt sometimes. I'm just like a floating head, like the scale is perfect. But that's pretty close what you're wearing. So yeah.
So for those just listening,
Yeah.
John has a wallpaper print of Bonobo style, and Drew has tried to match it as closely as possible with his shirt. So we planned this well.
Yeah,
All the things you miss if you're just listening to the audio.
Yeah, right.
Gotta watch what I do.
John,
Thanks for having me on too. I appreciate
welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Former CEO Bonobos, TRX. Do you want to maybe just give us a quick rundown? Because I think everybody in D2C knows Bonobos.
Yeah.
A quick rundown of like how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, and North Face, bunch of brands.
North Face.
Yeah.
Take us through it.
Well, yeah, I don't know if it's quick. I'll try to do the quick version. I've kind of fallen into it. And like, I'm a consumer branded guy now. I have a disease called apparel and footwear, and I just love it, I did a lot of things earlier in my career, corporate finance and management consulting, a little bit of private equity, but like I found myself at Nike, and this was like 2011, and Nike was like the real like formative experience of my career. I learned more there than I did at business school. And so I spent about 5 years at Nike doing strategy, which, we can talk more about that if you want, but it's a great place to like actually learn every aspect of the business. I was kind of the smart young guy they threw at every problem. And when you're like that across 5 years, you really get a chance to see everything. And I thought I'd stay at Nike forever and kind of switch from being the strategy right-hand guy to being the guy in the captain chair and, running a P&L. And I got a call from a headhunter at just the right moment who said, "Hey, do you want to transform the world's biggest outdoor brand based in the Bay Area?" I'm like, well, that is intriguing. Let me take that call. And that was the North Face. And I got to be, in Nike, I was just the head of strategy for like slices of their business. At the North Face, I was the head of strategy globally at a time when they really needed to transform the business. They had grown really well for like 15 years and then flatlined for a period of a few years before I started there. So, the then president, Todd Spoleto, and I, and a handful of others, like, were on a mission to like get the business back to growth. But when you're already the biggest in the outdoor world, you have to like grow beyond, right? And so like, it was really about category expansion and brand extension and, simplistically, like growing into sportswear and the athletic and athleisure world, in addition to holding on to your core outdoor business, right? And it was super fun. Big transformation. We changed everything about how we were structured, how we went to market. And, in the process of doing that, we built these business units, and I raised my hand and said, I'd love to finally make that jump over to the general management side and do this athletic and athleisure business unit. And we called that the run and train business. Simple is always easier when you're naming something. And that's what and it was fun. It was like, we grew that to $150 million and pretty short order. And I thought I was going to be at North Face for a long time. And, you find throughout your career that restructurings happen, and, that, it was a surprise, but it gave me the opportunity sitting there in the Bay Area, try something new. And TRX came along. It was much smaller than the worlds of like Nike and North Face, is about, like $50 million. Incredible, charismatic founder in Randy Hetrick, who is a Navy SEAL, who invented these black and yellow straps. And what was really cool about TRX was, one, it was like the first like president, like full P&L gig that I'd had. It was smaller and they gave me a shot at it. But, it was the opposite of most companies' issues, where you've got like a good business, but you're struggling to get brand awareness. TRX was the opposite, whereas like the business needed to have like some professional management to it, but the brand awareness was like off the charts. Like I could talk to people in like Germany and I'd be like TRX, and they might not know, but I might say the black and yellow straps. I'm like, oh yeah, I use that in my gym or with my personal trainer. And it just felt like this awesome opportunity to take this brand that was so well known and just bring a little process, a little strategy to it, which I felt like I could do. And so that was fun. That was 2019. And then the world changed in 2020. It was a total tale of two cities, and we can get into that some more. But we had the world's most affordable full body workout you could put over the back of your door at a time when everyone was starting to work out at home. And it was just, so many life and business lessons came along in the TRX time. But a lot like Peloton, kind of very publicly, TRX privately, we would have that stratospheric rise and the kind of meteoric fall in demand. And, when you're the head of the business, they'll look to you and, say like, maybe it's the person leading it to change it. And so, I eventually got let go. They went through a couple different things. Randy Hetrick got the business back over time, so I'm very happy for him, who is the founder of TRX. But again, lots of lessons. And then, I was doing different things in between, and Bonobos came along. What I loved about Bonobos was I had Bonobos pants before the company even existed. I was fortunate to go to business school with Andy Dunn and Brian Spaley, who were the co-founders of Bonobos at Stanford. And it was actually Brian who made Spaley pants, as we called them in school. And I, had a pair of those. And, I was really an early customer, and just a customer all along, not just kind of support my classmates really. And had a lot of fun with it. And I could, we can talk some more about it, but I just saw the potential to like bring Bonobos back to some of its, former glory. And it was a fun couple year ride with Bonobos. And
at that point they were owned by Walmart at that point.
Yeah. So Andy Dunn sold it to Walmart in 2017. And, Walmart is a great owner in the sense they have like the world's best balance sheet, but they really didn't. It was kind of a distraction for them. Like it was originally part of the jet.com kind of Walmart.com strategy that Mark Laurie was trying to bring into Walmart. And that strategy had like run its course by the time I got there in 2022. And so Walmart decided to exit all of their D2C digitally native businesses and asked me to help them with that. And I was like, sure. And, I love the brand too. And so it's been a fun ride helping them sell it, integrate with another business, and try to bring back the brand.
So that you knew going into the Bonobos leadership position that the vision was that they were going to divest of Bonobos, and you were going to, right?
Yeah. It was nice of them to let me know that. But in the interview process, I was actually interviewing with the EVP of all of apparel at Walmart. It's like $25 billion or something like that. And, I was like, what are you doing with Bonobos? They're like, well, we don't really know. We're looking for the next CEO to help us. And I'm like, well, I'm happy to continue to grow it on your balance sheet indefinitely, but we're not going to sell at Walmart. It's just not the same customer price point. And they agreed with that. And I also said like, hey, when you're ready to sell it, I think I'm uniquely able to help you do that as well, given my earlier stints in private equity and then, trying to help sell the TRX business a lot in the previous go. So, and right before they gave me the offer, they're like, actually, we're going to sell it. You still want the job? I'm like, sure, let's do this.
Yeah. And that's how you and I met.
Yeah.
I mean, we were at the same business school. We didn't meet there, but we were part of a group putting a low ball bid in on Bonobos during that process.
Yeah.
And
No, it
obviously we
was
didn't get
fun.
it.
I remember
And
the sim.
yeah, go ahead.
But I loved it for the same reason. I mean, the first digitally native apparel brand, maybe, or at least done put that term into play, right? That this
Right.
was like going to be one of the first to totally embrace customer lifetime value, to open up the guide shops,
Yeah.
just a pioneer. Like, you want to be a part of Bonobos, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's history.
Yeah. No, it's a really special company, really special brand. The team that is there and still there, there's some like, there's a handful of folks that were from kind of that original guard and original team early on. And yeah, it's a special place. So in a lot of ways though, the world caught up to it. Like selling online was no longer novel. And I think a lot of people kind of got lost that like D2C was like a revolutionary business model when in reality, it's just another channel of business, and so, Bonobos needed to like, modernize and like catch up to where others had kind of surpassed it in a lot of ways.
So is that what you did under your tenure?
Yeah, and there's only so much you can do when you're trying to drive a sale and an integration, right? But like, what's interesting about Bonobos is like it's, the the tech stack is still in a lot of ways like what they had to build themselves, like a decade ago or longer. In fact, like a lot of people don't realize it, but Bonobos at a certain point actually had a technology team sitting in Palo Alto trying to basically white label the e-commerce stack that we had built. And like before Shopify existed, they were basically trying to become Shopify. And that ran for a few years, and they kind of got confused. Are we a technology company or an apparel company? And they said, no, we're an apparel company. And they kind of pulled that team back. But it's curious to think like had Bonobos leaned into that pivot, it might be a totally different and much more valuable company today. But we still make amazing pants and suits and other things. And, it's a great fun brand and team. I still feel very proud of the team and the work that we put out over the past few years. So
How do you know if that work is worth it? And I guess, how do you measure success on that kind of branding work?
yeah. The way you measure it is on brand awareness. There's all sorts of ways to measure it. We actually worked with Harris Poll and we did like a weekly study on that, which is maybe too many measurements. Often you'll hear people do it like every 6 months or every quarter. But like for us, that brand awareness and consideration was an important number. And like when we started me and the new, I largely, credit Chrissy Milan, who's our CMO at Bonobos, with a lot of this great work. But she and I basically started at the same time. And, we were in the 20s in terms of like aided brand awareness. So like if someone gives you a list of brands, have you heard of them? Check box those. We were like 26, 27, which on the one hand is like great because you've checked yourself into a general brand awareness, but there's like another like 75% of people out there who've never heard of Bonobos or know that it's, pronounced Bonobos and it's not Bombas, the sock company, like all these different ways of like people, not really knowing this. And so we measure that a lot, brand awareness, and moving that is difficult. We moved it up into the mid 30s over the past 2 years, which is pretty considerable. It's like a 7 to 10 point move, when like moves in brand awareness of like 1 or 2 or 3 points is like generally seen as successful. So that part we felt really good about. And like so much, I'm sure you guys talk about this all the time, but bottom of funnel marketing is just, there's not a lot there. Like we call it a funnel because you got to fill the top of the funnel, right? And that brand marketing or that like, getting onto people's awareness and consideration makes the bottom of funnel so much more efficient, right? And so like that's what you guys do so well in helping other companies out there. Get into a mailbox is going to be better than an email inbox, right? And so those are the sorts of things that we were trying to do is rebalance our marketing, which had gotten way too dependent on performance marketing, rebalance that to brand so we can fill the funnel, get more people to know about us.
This is something that's a really hot topic right now. I think especially now because people's P&Ls are stretched a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's really people have a hard time thinking about how to allocate resources to top of funnel and awareness versus bottom of funnel.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right. Like bottom of funnel is just circling the drain at this point.
Yeah.
How did you all think about um, again those success indicators and how you would allocate spend and marketing effort and dollars across different stages of the funnel?
Yeah. It's so a couple different ways. And maybe it was like principles too. Like one of the principles we had was like to not move it too quickly. Like we understood that like that bottom of funnel, like Bonobos was spending more than 75% of its marketing budget on bottom of funnel performance marketing. And we knew we weren't going to shift that to 25% overnight. You do that, you're going to kill your revenues. So we knew that it needed to be like a gradual shift. I think what surprised me was I thought we would shift more dollars over time into brand, and we didn't actually have to. It wasn't like flipping it from 75-25 in terms of performance marketing to, 25 performance marketing and 75 brand. It was much more gradual. I think maybe, and we never really got there, but like maybe a more optimum would have been 40% brand and 60% performance marketing. The point being, and again, we probably got to like 30-70 right on that. And so it doesn't take as much spend on brand and upper funnel as people think, but it makes a world of difference in terms of your efficiency as you work your way through to those hardworking conversion investments. And then to your question on like measurement, a couple different things. Like one is tracking brand awareness and seeing that it's checking through. One is like checking all of your channels and hopefully driving more ROAS, although I think ROAS is like one of the hardest and worst metrics to use. But then like, ultimately, like, is the business growing too? Like at the end of the day, like the top line on a monthly basis and like the profitability of the business, like sometimes we get lost in like micro measurements on marketing channels, and you're using dubious data. Like, is the business feeling like it's growing or not? Like that said a lot. And then the other thing we did was we used a media mix model too. It takes a little money to pay for it, but there's some great econometricians, or I don't even know the term for it, like PhD data science folks in econometrics. And, they built something for us that helped us understand investments in brand and how they were delivering on the business more holistically, that give us a sense that it was working too. So kind of like as many measurements as possible, but also like, is the business performing ultimately too?
What kind of time frame did you look at measuring some of those top of funnel investments?
You got to give us
some expectation on when you would start seeing movement from that.
I was trying to give us, and it sounds like forever, but you just have to believe. I was trying to give us 6 to 12 months to start to see things. What was really surprising was, particularly in like the brand awareness tracking, we were starting to see results in like 1 to 2 months. And then it got better and better over time. And that's what I was surprised by is typically brand investments, you got to give yourself some time. But what was surprising to see was like, it can actually start to make an impact sooner than people realize.
What's an example of one that really worked well, even though you don't have a ROAS on it?
We kind of had outsourced our creative. The previous like leadership had outsourced to an agency, and that agency was great and supportive. But when I reflect on thinking about the output, like it was just kind of all over the place. And so what I think really worked well for us, and again, kind of surprised at how fast it worked, was we went through a pretty deliberate rebranding effort, bringing an agency to support us, some consumer research, and then really trying to define a look and feel that was, the ethos was like, let's get back to the fun Bonobos, but let's like modernize it for today, right? It can't be fratty or broy in terms of tone, but it needs to be clever and witty. Let's be thoughtful about color because, clearly I'm pointing to my background, like we can be bold and fun. And so um, we spent a couple months doing that hard work, but we came out of it with like a really clear, like brand, playbook, persona, palette, all of those important things. And then we put it into place in a fall campaign and just put out, all of the content that we put out over, like, again, really until this day was like following that formula. I think the consistency around that, hopefully surprising people a little bit, or like, reminding them of what they enjoyed about Bonobos. Like there was a pretty nice immediate reaction to that. And we could, again, measure that in brand awareness numbers, as well as, a nice bump in revenues. And that was in fall of 23. So we had a great 2023 into 2024. And I think a lot of it was like showing a new face that was familiar, but also fresh, if that makes sense.
One of the other philosophies I think that Bonobos kind of inspired Drew and I on was this concept of whales and minnows.
Yeah.
Treating different customers differently. The people who come in and buy, socks are a lot different than the people who buy the suit. Was that something that sort of persisted in your tenure? Was that something that you all looked at a lot? Is bifurcating customers that way?
What was really fun about Bonobos was when I started, I kind of went on a listening tour of like all these OG Bonobians who had like gone on to other places. And I had several people talk to me about the whales and minnows strategy. So we didn't call it that anymore. Maybe we should have, because it's a great shorthand. But it was like built into the way we thought about our business. We like so many other companies, identified a VIP segment. We don't have a loyalty program, which maybe like makes us an anomaly in this day and age. But Bonobos has a business model that is inherently sticky. We make lots of different fits for our product, and once you find your perfect fit, you're not going to find it at a J. Crew or wherever. And so that is inherently sticky. But our VIPs, spent like 4 times more with us. They're 4 to 6 times more valuable, like depending on the time frame that you would pick, right? And so, absolutely, that ethos of whales and minnows was still with us, and we thought about it as we tried to build our business. But like, and it's like maybe a grade above minnows, maybe it's like small feeder fish or something like that. Those customers matter too, right? And so like that's the beauty of like a business offense, is like figuring out how can you optimize up and down like different consumer and customer segments.
How did you sort of orient the business around targeting those different segments differently?
Yeah, I mean, I wish you would. We're awash in data, right? And like, this is maybe one of those places where I think like some of the industry had surpassed us. We were kind of stuck with some older stuff in terms of like data and CRMs and other things, and so we really just kind of had segments based on purchase behavior, which is helpful. A lot of people do that, right? How many times have they purchased? So, we definitely were, focused on VIPs. Again, we didn't have like a loyalty program, so we weren't offering discounts or anything. We would give them like previews of product, first chance at new product, first chance at sales, those sorts of things converted really well. But a lot of times, like our biggest opportunity was getting that like big bucket of one-time buyers to become a second-time buyer, and just like playing with all the different sort of tactics that can get you there. Of course, discounts are always the fastest way, but not the best way in terms of lifetime value. So it's just kind of playing with those things. We tried to understand too, beyond just like frequency, like what they were buying. We learned some really interesting things of like, our flagship product is a Chino. We call it the Chino 2.0, right? And like, if a buyer came in for that, they were pretty likely to buy another Chino at some point. Like it's that guy who just, doesn't want to spend a lot of time shopping. He's found the thing, it works for him. He bought it in khaki, now he wants the charcoal one, right? And so like that was also a way for us to like try to get those people to repeat purchase. And then we had like an interesting like golf segment. We had like a really nice little golf line, and we found that was kind of like a unique buyer. Like that person might actually stay a lot in our golf world and buy there. And so let's just like understanding frequency and the types of purchases they are making to try to, get them to repeat more. And we were very fortunate to have like a great repeat rate and retention rate. Not every company has that luxury. So,
I think you guys were one of the first to open stores, and that was a big, at the time, the marketing department worked with Peter Fader from Wharton, and there was a lot of,
yeah.
you put out a lot of content about how opening up the guide shops got you in front of the highest value customers, right? Like your whale customers. Is that still the case? Is that you see a lot of like your best customers coming through the stores?
Yeah, and just for everyone to know, like Bonobos has these thing called guide shops. Our guide shops are small format stores, and unlike the normal store, it's really a fitting experience in a showroom. We don't have any inventory for you to carry out there, and that still surprises people. We've had them since 2012, so we're working on 12, 13 years of having guide shops out there. Definitely, people still walk in and think like, "Hold it, I don't get the product in a shopping bag." But it was actually, we built them because of a unique consumer insight. The Bonobos corporate team used to be headquartered on the 5th floor of a building in Midtown, still headquartered in Midtown, but in a different facility, but on the 5th floor. And people would find us. They would literally like Google the office and come up unannounced and just show up to our 5th floor. And they're like, "Hey, I just want to try on some pants. I just want to know that they fit." And we'd happen to build like a little showroom because we were at that point already trying to sell to Nordstrom. So Bonobos, digitally native, but like even 5 years in, realized the power of omnichannel, which we can talk about. So guide shops and Nordstrom kind of both happened at the same point as we were trying to like find, distribution in the world. And anyways, the insight was like guys came, tried it on, and were totally fine. They're like, "Yeah, I'll just, I'll put in the order here and you can ship it to me 2 days later." And so with that insight, we actually had a guide shop in our 5th floor office for 10 years for people doing that. We opened the first guide shop in Soho, and it just worked. And so to your point, although again, the original digitally native brand, we recognize the power of like brick and mortar or like the real experience, particularly building the business around fit. People want to make sure things fit well. And so our best customers are still the ones who come through. Actually, the very best customer is someone who gets fitted at a guide shop, knows what works for them, and then orders online for repeat purchases until something new comes out or until their body changes, they want to get fitted again. And that omni-channel customer is like, even if you just take a snapshot of a year, they're like 2 times, they're buying 2 times more and they're spending 3 times more just in a year. And then you extrapolate that over like a longer lifetime value. They're much, much more valuable, that person who shops both guide shops and online. And so, and it just makes sense. People want to touch and feel a lot of times, but they don't want to do it every time,
Right.
So, yeah.
Is that in your playbook now? Like if you ever run an apparel brand again, it's like, we need brick and mortar.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think like for me, I'm just like I want to be where the consumer is shopping, period. Right. And so I think there's a big value in like owning as much of that experience as possible. And so if I've got the capital, I'd be building my own stores because I think that immersive experience in the brand is so much more valuable. They're buying a lot more from you and they're better customers over the lifetime. But if it means, showing up in a Nordstrom or a Bloomingdale's or something like that, when they're thinking about buying pants or a shirt or a suit or what have you, like I want to be there also, at that moment of decision and present my brand. And, I'm willing to bet that the brand that I'm with is going to win, like that's just kind of the mindset you got, go in and fight for customers wherever they are.
How about if outside of apparel, like TRX,
Yeah. TRX was interesting too, because like TRX, most of the sales of TRX when I got there were actually B2B sales to gyms. And so the founder and the early growth of the business recognized that like by putting like selling to trainers or selling to gym owners, getting that product out there and used by people, that was the thing that was going to drive the at-home purchase. And that still kind of worked really well. And so TRX, even though it was, a smaller business and some of the other ones I've been in, was really well distributed across every channel you can think of. And a lot of it was like building in trial by going to gyms and trainers first and then selling it to people at home. Yeah.
How did you look at the economics of a store, particularly for Bonobos? It's interesting to see the brands now, how things have come full circle, and so many brands are sort of realizing the same thing, is like, we've got to be where the customer is, and that's not just online. And they're starting to roll out their own stores. They're starting to also go into wholesale too. But especially when it comes to thinking about an owned retail strategy.
Yeah.
How do you think about the economics of that?
Yeah. And the traditional way of measuring it is what they call four-wall profitability, right? So like, once you cover your rent and like your, the labor allocation and then some sort of like marketing and corporate overhead, like, is that business still profitable within those four walls, right? And it varies, right? Like a Nike and North Face or like other big established retailers, they want to see 20 to 25% four-wall profitability, which is a pretty high bar. But because they have such awareness and clout, they can go get that. Bonobos and other companies don't have that, right? And so you still want to make sure your store is four-wall profitable, but like in my mind, like break even was fine because of this like omni-channel lifetime value of the customer. Like I know that customers that come through a guide shop are much more valuable. They stay longer, and it helps the web side of the business, right? And so I encourage people to take a little bit longer view or broader view than the traditional four-wall profitability. Another way to look at it is just like customer acquisition. Like nowadays, like $100 CACs are like not uncommon for a lot of brands, very expensive. And like a storefront, like, some of our storefronts would get like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 new customers a year. And so when you like factor that in, that's like $200,000, of like, or 20,000 or like 50,000, like however you want to like calculate that. But like that's real value as well. And so like, I can acquire customers once you pay off the capital you invested in that business, in that storefront. That's kind of free customer acquisition year in and year out. And so like to me, like there's lots of ways to measure it. I encourage people not to get too stuck on like the four-wall profitability, because that'll be a barrier to them getting started and kind of missing like the broader value of like that omni-channel customer.
And I remember all the theses of these companies that, the private equity companies that were going to buy Bonobos from Walmart. We're all like, let's get rid of the stores. Let's just cut it down. Find the profitable stores, and then we're going to cut everything else.
There was definitely a lot. And not that at the end of the day, we had to go to the best and highest value for Walmart, of course, in the sale. But like when people were asking me who would I prefer, like it was definitely people who understood the value of stores, or what we'd be losing if we had to close all those stores. Because there's definitely a group of investors out there who just see them as capital intensive and not very profitable, and kind of miss the true value that they bring. And then there's others who, it's a tough time to raise capital too. Like I would have loved to add another 50 stores, but it's like really hard to do that as well. So it just, I get why it's a harder decision for folks, but I think if you can afford to do it, you're not going to regret it.
Honestly, and I'm not saying this just because I run Post-Pilot, but it's like when some of these big iconic brands cut the catalog and then do worse afterwards over the next 6 months, because it's like this big line item that they just think they're going to get rid of. And what they actually end up doing is getting rid of their highest value customers. I know J. Crew went through that before they
Yeah.
rebooted
And
the whole thing.
totally, you can see how much value they realized came from it with the big splashy, like, we're bringing back the catalog, and they had a big event for it and everything, which shows you, I think, how, like, the realization of like how valuable it was, but also what it meant to people. Like J. Crew is like, everyone remembers those catalogs, and like, they went away, and then, not coincidentally, like J. Crew kind of went off the radar for a while with people. So we were doing a lot the same thing. Bonobos had a great catalog business for many years. They went away from it like in COVID, and then it, took us a while to start to reboot it, because it is an expensive proposition, and it's, you got to prove it out. But as we put tests out there, they worked. They were incremental. It's a, as you guys know, it's a great channel, and you can measure it just as well as you can measure anything else, and frankly better.
So what's the future of D2C look like for you? Or maybe it's what's the future of consumer brands look like?
Yeah. That's what I was going to say, is I think the future of D2C is really just like the future of consumer, right? So like, I think D2C is a channel, and I think that channel has like matured. And frankly, I think there's aspects of profitability in the channel that are really challenging right now. The companies that are succeeding are ones that are like truly omni-channel, meaning D2C web, D2C their own stores, and like a nice wholesale business, right? Like the balance of those things, like anyone I can think of, and I don't necessarily want to name names, still like call anyone out, but like the ones that are working right now and successful have that balance, but have a strong D2C presence. I do believe that direct connection to the consumer matters. Yes, it matters on the data, but like it really just kind of matters more on like how people feel about you. You're not just some random brand that they pick up because they need it in a retail store. Like, you're communicating to them, and you're providing value to them. Hopefully you're entertaining them or inspiring them in between purchases. And like, I think that matters too. And I think that's where people get lost, is in the world of like, just email them more often or just add another discount. Like, I worry about, like, that's not sustainable. That's not going to work, right? But brands who recognize they're trying to build a relationship with people, entertain and inspire, I think that's the way. And then meet the customer wherever they are, whatever channel you can sell to them.
One of the other philosophies that I think we both subscribe to, especially with all of us being involved in a lot of turnarounds, is like the Drucker quote of culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
So you sort of alluded to it earlier, culture at Bonobos, but throughout your career, like, how has that impacted how you've operated these businesses? And what, I think people overlook that a lot and think it's all about sort of performance marketing metrics and things like that. How do you build culture in these organizations, and how do you change culture in organizations that you've had to step into?
Yeah. I love the question. Because at the end of the day, like, it really is about culture and people. Like, those are the things that make something work, or they're the things that like didn't work, right? And so I think what I've learned, so I worked, like, Nike was an amazing place, very competitive, which has its pluses and minuses, but like really just wanted to do the world's best work. And like, you can learn so much there. The North Face, not nearly as political, which was awesome, but moved a little bit slower, but still like had big ambitions and people who cared. I think the outdoor industry like gets people like that. TRX was awesome in a sense of like, really, and particularly at that time, like, we thought we were changing people's lives because we were helping them work out at a time when everyone was like sheltering in place. And Bonobos, just, legendary culture, really empathetic, cared a lot, and really want to do a good job. Like, I think what I learned about each of those places is, unless you're at a startup, you're joining a culture that exists, right? And like, I think particularly as a leader, like, you're bringing, like, you can create some aspect of culture, but like, it's, either you align with the culture or you don't, right? Or you're fighting, upstream. And I think there was times in my career where I was was fighting upstream a little bit, and there's other places where I wasn't, where I felt like, the culture that already existed was really kind of aligned with like how I behaved and operated. And I've definitely felt that way at Bonobos. It felt like a great fit. Felt like we could drive a lot of change. A lot of change happened, but it felt okay. Like I didn't feel like on any aspect like we wrecked the great culture there, which was really about like a tight knit team who cared about each other. To be able to navigate that. I leaned into that culture. Um, I think I'm a transparent and honest guy, and I come across as empathy as kind of like a high, piece of what I do in terms of like teams and leadership, and it just worked. And so I think that's what I would say is like it really is about culture and people at the end of the day, but it really helps to make sure that like how you are and how you lead and how you show up aligns with that culture. Because if not, it's gonna be a tough fit or just gonna feel a lot more challenging than it should.
Good advice. I think my last question is about your career and sort of, I mean, you've done something that everybody wants to do. Probably who listens to this podcast, the young marketer or merchandiser who wants to run a P&L and ultimately run some of these big brands. I mean, you've worked at so many big brands. How would you advise somebody who's now early in their career, blocking and tackling at a Shopify brand, a Shopify store right now, $5-10 million in revenue to get to where you've gone?
Well, I will say that like on the resume or LinkedIn, it looks like a nice linear path. Like it didn't feel that way. I think anyone who's like gone far enough in their career would say, it's a long and winding path. But I think, getting great experience and great experiences matters a lot. I think um, what's interesting about maybe my career is like I've never like had the same job more than 2.5 years. I've worked in the same company and had different jobs, but like I would be like what headhunters might call like it looks like a jumpy resume. I go from one thing to the other. And for me, it's always like what I really liked was like coming into a situation, hopefully learning quickly, making an impact, and then like making sure things are set up well for the future and then moving to the next thing. I don't know if it's like just intellectual curiosity or whatever, but like I think for people, like make sure you're like gathering great experiences along the way. That can be in the same firm, but like pushing yourself and stretching yourself into other roles. But like, you know, to get to CEO, you're going to have like a number of roles along the way, and just, don't get stuck in the same place if it's not feeling right. Um, but definitely like make sure you kind of understand like what you're doing a job for, what you hope to gain from it, how it stretches you. And then, at a certain point, think about what's next. And, the world's big, it's changing a lot. Um, I value people who have, lots of experiences that they can draw on versus someone who kind of just took a pretty static journey somewhere. So, yeah.
That's huge. I think like get a lot of at bats,
Yeah.
and don't sit idle. Like I think the times I've been the most frustrated in my career, looking back, I've just been in one position too long, and I didn't have the motivation to switch for some reason. So
Totally. Yeah. I mean, and what's interesting to me too is Bonobos was an awesome opportunity, but it was also like there was a lot of change we had to navigate in the past 2.5 years. And I was very heads down. And just in the past like 6-7 weeks since I've, left the business has been such a great generative, exciting, exploratory time. AI and, all these different things I've been diving into in conversations. Like I feel like in some ways, like I've grown in the more like in the past 6 or 7 weeks of just talking to people and seeing what's interesting out there than I did in 6 to 12 months in the Bonobos grind. And so like make sure you're getting like generative times in your career as well. It can be in a job or it can be in between jobs, but like that's actually like really invigorating for me, and I hope that for a lot of people.
have you seen anything in AI that is impacting apparel?
I mean, like we have enough for another podcast. I think AI is going to dramatically change how you run a consumer business in the next like 12 months. And so that's been like a big part of my exploration, is like kind of building this thesis of like, okay, well, how and where, and let me learn as much as I can about those things, either to utilize them in my next gig, whatever that is, or to just try to like, stay on the pulse of what's happening. But I just think that if you do any sort of analytics as part of your job, finance or planners or something like that, your world's going to change. AI agents can do so much more and faster. I think that, obviously, like things like CX and customer service is actually quite mature. There's like, lots of brands out there, but, there's been like a wave of like in-house CX to offshore BPOs. I think chatbots are I think people that are like actually implementing these things are like, those chatbots are taking like 75 or 80% of incoming customer contacts, and people are like loving it. Like, you're giving me the answer right when I want it. Great. I don't care if you're a bot, And then I think things like truly personalized marketing, like we've been talking about personalized marketing for like a couple decades now, it seems. And it's never really, been about the ability to create customer segmentation. We've been able to do that for a while. It's been about like marrying up the content, the message. What is the personalized message? And that still required like graphic designers and copywriters and like creative directors to approve stuff. And like the company that like cracks like the ability with generative AI to like actually provide variations on copy, offer, image, video, whatever, and that like really detailed customer segmentation, like that's personalized marketing, and you can do it at scale. And I thought like some of the image and video stuff was going to be a couple years away, and it's like the advances I've seen in just like a couple months is like jaw dropping. So like it's so interesting. And that's
it is, and it's a topic for another podcast. But I kind of feel like the three of us, in this stage of our career, in our late 40s, early 50s, it's an interesting point because we're not totally aged out of it and just be like, I don't care what happens. But we have access to these bigger sort of like legacy brands and iconic brands, and yet we still, maybe through our kids or something, are just tied into the state of the art. And we got the ability to sort of bridge that gap, right? And bring whatever's working for some of these startups we see and bring it to like the bigger legacy brands. It's an interesting position.
Yeah. And like the thing about AI too is like usually like new technologies favor the young because they're just more willing to try something or what have you. I've heard, this is not an original idea by me, but like AI is actually going to benefit the experienced folks like us and maybe like, a few years younger, because we've actually done the work and we know when we're getting garbage output. Like I actually feel bad for the kid who's 20, who's like using ChatGPT to like create something and it's done in a black box. He has no idea how it's done. He sees the output, says, okay, I don't really have enough bats to know if this is reasonable or not. I'm going to pass it on. It's like, no, like the number of times in ChatGPT, I'm like, I think you're wrong. You need to check this. And it's like, oh, yes, you're right. There is a whole data field that I omitted. I'm like, so it might ironically, benefit more experienced folks out there, but it would make it really hard for Gen Z getting jobs right now. So we'll see what happens.
Totally agree with you. I think knowing what good looks like is going to be a hugely important skill. Entry-level work is going to be tough.
Totally tough. Or this is just what we're telling ourselves, so we feel good about our jobs.
I mean, it's all getting eaten at some point. It's just like in which order and at what time.
Totally. I totally agree. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks, John. This was awesome. This was really, really fun and just great knowledge. Thanks for sharing with us. And we really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Once again, talk about what changed.
Totally. Yeah. No, it's awesome. Thank you guys. It's been fun.